请收看维新世界台湾宗教学会。
Encyclicals, which it's a term that comes from the Greek, which means circular, a letter. So encyclicals are letters addressed by the Pope to different branches of the Church to offer an assessment of a given issue and enunciate the opinion of the Holy See in order to guide the members of the Church, but also possibly the rest of society, as is the case with this encyclical. And it's a sort of revitalization, if you like, of religion and of the behavior of individuals. And religious leaders, as we know, they perceive cultural tendencies and popular expectations. So they can either condemn these aspirations or they can suggest positive actions, which is exactly the intent behind this encyclical. Now, the absence of a firm public position of Rome on the severe issue of ecological disaster was criticized by many within and outside the Church, mostly after the address of Bartholomew, so 97, and you have to wait another 20 years, or 15 years, or so, well, anyway, to get the Pope, 20 years almost, to get Rome speaking out on this. Everybody was saying, well, what are they doing? To some extent, I guess, the Church was waiting to make sure that what it said was fine. And also, and I found this very interesting, there's a specialist called Bron Taylor, some of you may know him, who has studied the way religions have reinvented their own ecological roots. And he says that the major merit of Lynn White's paper in 1967 was to send religions scuttling for their own ecological roots. That is to say, to find what was ecological in their own past so that they wouldn't be accused of being responsible for the ecological disaster. And Bron Taylor called that the greening of religion hypothesis. In any case, when Laudato Si, the encyclical, was published, it was held as the most important magisterial document in the Church, the Catholic Church, since Vatican II, which was the council from 62 to 65. It's a rather long document, 83 pages in this format. I wish it had been a bit shorter because it can be repetitive at times. And what is interesting is that when Bartholomew's address specifically spoke to the Orthodox community, the Pope here literally addresses the whole world. He doesn't say, I'm talking to Catholics. He says, I'm speaking to men of goodwill, all men of goodwill. I would like to enter, I'm quoting, I would like to enter into dialogue with all people about a common home. And this year being the 10th anniversary, hundreds of celebrations in writing or in action have been held around the world. Now, a few words now about the introductory paragraphs. Oh, sorry, I forgot to show you Paul Cretson and the Pope. And then we will see, this is for afterwards. But the introductory paragraphs of the encyclical. It opens on the praise of Saint Francis in the Canticle of Creatures, Laudato Si mi Signore, praise be to you, my Lord. And this preamble sounds like a friendly continuation of the discussion between the Pope and Lynn White, because Lynn White, in 1967, concluded his accusing article by saying that, in fact, Christianity could also be nice at times, since Christianity had produced Saint Francis of Assisi. And his last line in his article was that Saint Francis of Assisi should be named the saint of ecology, which is what was done afterwards. So the Pope uses the same terms for the earth that the saint, Saint Francis, chose, in which the earth is feminized, sister, Mother Earth. And the saint addressed the natural elements in their physicality, sister moon, brother sun, brother fire. The Pope refers also to Nostra Madre Terra, which has been, I must say, poorly translated in English by Mother Earth. And more than in Italian, Spanish, or French, this name, Mother Earth, immediately conjures up the reverence indigenous people are supposed to have for the earth, mostly, of course, in English, in North America. And these terms, Mother Earth, have become the rallying mantra of climate activists in the West, at least. And the following paragraphs operate in the same lexical field. Quote, "This sister now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her," end of quote. And this line calls up another ecological manifesto, the famous plea attributed, without certainty, to the Native American chief Seattle in 1854, who in treaty negotiations with the American government complained that his people could not sell their mother the land, their brothers the rivers, their soil, since they did not belong to them, but only to God. So I found that these opening paragraphs of the encyclical are meant to attract the attention of all those interested in the environment in terms that are easily identifiable, not particularly Catholic, generally identifiables, as coming not from an obscure intellectual authority, but from someone who shares the same contemporary linguistic and social codes. Now, a few words on the problem of sin. Immediately after the introductory praises, Pope Francis denounces the violence present in our hearts, wounded by sin, that is reflected in the sickness of the soil. And the term sin, also used by Patriarch Bartholomew, radically places the text now in the Christian doctrinal register. Sin is one of the major keywords of the encyclical. A sin is an action or a non-action, an omission, a thought, a word that offends God and severs his relation to the sinner. And Christianity is all about sin and guilt. Christians are taught to engage in constant soul searching, in examination of their conscience, in order to take stock of their personal guilt in all kinds of areas, and to change course in order to be redeemed. This is exactly what Lynn White, a Protestant, was doing. Where is our mistake? When did I sin? Maybe, Lynn said, because we followed Genesis. Now, Crutzen said that the original sin was when James Watt invented the steam machine. Now, importantly, what Pope Francis is doing is that he's shifting to man the onus that White had leveled against Genesis, against the Bible. Pope Francis exonerates the Bible and religion. He criticizes man who sinned. But since Christianity is also about redemption, the Pope shows the light to his listeners, and he says, you can all help and change and be redeemed. You have now to help the earth get better. And also, you must now help the other people, not just the earth, but the other people. And this is how Pope Francis is asking for an implementation of the famous social doctrine of the Catholic Church. And this is totally explained in one of the sub-chapters that speaks of the decline in the quality of human life and the breakdown of society. And he develops this at length. So I will not develop this here too much, but the Pope introduces here recommendations such as we have to realize that a true ecological approach is always a social approach. We must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment, as we have to hear the cry of the earth, but mostly the cry of the poor throughout the whole world. And now we move to the Catholic theology of creation. A full chapter is dedicated to the gospel of creation, which is on the doctrine of how, in fact, science and religion, with their distinctive approaches to understanding realities, must enter into an intense dialogue. And the Pope also alludes to what Lynn White said, and the Pope says, no, no, no. God never, the Bible never says that we must dominate nature, but we must keep it, care for it, protect it, oversee it, preserve it. This implies a relation of mutual responsibility between human beings and nature. And he says, I quote, "The Bible has no place for a tyrannical, anthropocentrism, unconcerned for other creatures." So again, he's replying to Lynn White. And then he moves on to a theological point of how man and nature live in full harmony with Jesus. And I skip this because I would be too long otherwise. Now, and at the end, he concludes on the necessity to perform sacraments in which nature and natural elements mediate our relation to God. So it goes without saying that the encyclical was duly commented, and the fact that Paul Crutzen, and the Anthropocene had been dealt with quite a lot in the text, made the encyclical a very serious scientific document. Now, I would like to move on to my last point, which is the Laudato Si movement, and which answers the question I raised in the beginning: do religions have the power to make us act in a particular direction? Immediately after the release of the encyclical, groups of Catholics felt the need to organize and act according with its prescriptions, and they founded the Laudato Si movement in just a few months after the encyclical, so in 2015. It's a spirit-led movement that brings Catholics together to accomplish a stated mission in collaboration with all people of good wills. And it's interesting, since we are close to the Philippines, to learn that the Philippines, this is the country in which the movement really started. And Catholics in Asia have taken the lead in general. I never heard of the Laudato Si movement in France, for example, though it has chapters, but I only learned about it when I was studying for this and found that it was far more active in Asia, or at least talked more about in Asia. So the movement is very well organized. I skip all kinds of things. You can find that on the internet. I joined, I am registered, but they keep telling me that I'm not active. As you can see, another year has passed, Bernadette, and you haven't taken action. So they really make me feel like a sinner because I don't do everything they recommend me to do. They're very active. So they have strategic objectives, and I skip that. So I move now to my conclusion. I've skipped, of course, a lot of things, but you can have the longer version, I think, on your table. So to conclude, so this is the Laudato Si movement. They have a prayer book. This is the current Pope celebrating the Day of Creation. this is also what the Vatican is doing, agrivoltaic, central for electricity in the Vatican. This is something taking place in Asia, in India, and I conclude on St. Francis here. So my present conclusion then, my presentation has navigated between affirmations that religions impacted the behavior of their practitioners and counterexamples when material motives superseded spiritual views, such as the necessity to use natural resources, timber, game, etc., to survive, to feed people, to keep them from the cold, etc., etc. So it is also now, we must wonder whether the address of Bartholomew, the encyclical, etc., have some function. I feel that they do. Bartholomew's address and the encyclical played a momentous role, first that of educating the members of these religious groups. And also these addresses participated in the international conferences to find solutions for climate change. In particular, Bartholomew's address was presented just before the Kyoto Protocol was signed. The encyclical was published just a few months before the Paris COP21, so that they are part of the general debate on what can we do now to slow climate change. Furthermore, these documents encourage other religious authorities to send similar recommendations to their members. In 2015, Muslim authorities from 60 countries met and also produced an Islamic declaration, and that started Green Islam. Buddhists also met in 2015, different leaders, to also produce a document on climate change action. So one question we may ask ourselves, would the agenda and the conclusions of the Kyoto Protocol and of the Paris Agreement have been different without the incitement of spiritual leaders? Probably not. Now, another question, would the various summits addressing climate change be followed by different recommendations without the encyclical and the address? Yes, no, they wouldn't have been different because, in fact, the international conferences are the ones taking real action, and it's visible that there are material, social, political, and economic impacts of those problems. And in fact, the actual actors of the implementation of possible remedies are the states, the parliaments, the national and local policy makers. They are the ones who actually operate on, locally. But we must never overlook the practical consequences of moral declarations. And regarding, for example, the specific influence of the Roman Catholic Church, which was the focus of my paper, I see 3 levels of leverage. First, it's astute partnership with high-level scientists such as Crutzen, to benefit from their expertise so that its own religious message sounds scientifically accurate, and also its huge and unique capacity to disseminate throughout the whole world their ideas through the various publications of the Vatican, and of course through the encyclical. And also the moral power of the encyclical down to the low level of the active members of the church, in particular thanks to Laudato Si movement. So it does seem clear to me that these moral injunctions do have a message. So the answer of the call of paper of a symposium, which was, do religious traditions care, in fact, for sustainability? Are they aware of their responsibility towards sustainability? I feel that at least those I have spoken about are definitely aware of the responsibility. And more importantly, from the top of the hierarchy down to the local members, they are engaged in efficient, practical programs to try to alleviate the tragic consequences of past behavior. Thank you.
谢谢那个 Bernadette 的演讲哈。那我想应该是不用我做回应了哈，再做回应下去的话，那个我就赶不上车子了哈。那大会此次的主题叫做人类世，它是一个那个地质生态的一个概念哈。人类世，它透过那个 Bernadette 的那个演讲，我们至少可以很清晰的了解到欧美的宗教传统，它怎么去论述生态问题跟危机，特别是找一个我们最具有代表性的生态通域，也就是说，方济各的那个生态通域。那最近我对于一个概念叫做生态归一，生态归一很有兴趣哈。我一直在想，生态系统它本身有没有宗教性？人有人的宗教性，它是天生的、自然而然。但生态它本身有没有宗教性？如果有的话，他们的宗教是不是跟我们一样？他有没有敬拜上帝？他会不会敬拜王禅老祖？哦，我们如何带领生态皈依的概念，就是带领他一起去敬拜神。我们如何去带领他们敬拜神？我很期待透过在台湾的各宗教传统，能够有效的解答生态灾难，因为我们正在生态的灾难当中。花莲它就是一种生态灾难。哦，那个自然生态，因为它这里面除了所谓的自然的下雨的下雨之外，包括整个土地使用的结构、人力的问题，哦，基本上都是属于人祸。所以我想说，如果可以透过各宗教传统有效的解答生态灾难，进一步可以给信徒超越苦难的能力。我想这是我最期待看到的哈。Thanks for Bernadette, your speech. Through your speech, at least we can clearly see how the religious tradition of Europe to the source ecology success. Now I am very interested about ecological conversion. Is the ecosystem is religious, how to believe God, and how can we worship God with ecology. So I look forward to how to effectively solve ecological disasters through various religions in Taiwan. They can take some word to take how can we in solution the ecology problem, then give the empower the believers to over the platform. So I very thank you for your presentation. Thank you. 好，谢谢各位。
台湾宗教学会2025年会天启数位人类世国际学术研讨会开幕式到此圆满。
奉献大地。